Let's take you now to Washington. Joining me now are CBSN political contributor and political reporter for The Guardian, Sabrina Siddiqui, and Washington Post reporter David Nakamura. Thanks to you both. Sabrina, let me start with you and the issue of President Trump, the news that he had revoked the security clearance of John Brennan, former CIA chief. The president says that he hopes John Brennan sues. The president's lawyer, Rudy Giuliani, appeared to taunt him on Twitter as well. What is the White House's strategy here?
Well, I think that the White House has been trying to frame this entire matter as one of partisanship by suggesting that Brennan has a crusade against this particular president, when in fact he has historically been a nonpartisan figure. He's served presidents in 4 administrations, and this is really the first time we have seen him be so outspoken during the course of the Trump presidency, and he said it's because he thinks that this president poses a unique threat. Now, the issue of the lawsuit is that if he wants to, Brennan could make a pretty credible case before a judge that the president acted in retaliation when he revoked his security clearance. And what that actually could do is backfire against the president, because it could take the issue of security clearances out of the purview of the executive branch and perhaps provide more of an oversight role either by the courts or by Congress. It's not clear why the president wants to expose himself to something that in the end might actually constrain his powers as opposed to keeping the status quo.
Well, so David, President Trump has said he is looking to strip the security clearance of Justice Department official Bruce Ohr quickly. What message would it send if the president were to strip the security clearance of a current Justice Department official?
Well, right, Elaine. So he had this list that Sarah Sanders read out at the briefing the other day of other officials that he might target, including Bruce Ohr, as you mentioned. Bruce Ohr was the only current active official on that list, and that would take this into a whole other arena, because obviously, folks all across the government, including the Justice Department, have these security clearances ranging from lower level all the way to top secret, like John Brennan had, and then need that to perform their work. And to sort of politicize this, even for current officials, could send certainly a message throughout the government that you just can't criticize the president. But of course, every name on that list was really someone the president has been angry about related to this Russia investigation. So it's not like he's going after everybody for criticizing him. Rather, it's really focused and targeted on this investigation, which has really certainly alarmed opponents of the president, who said the president's really trying to silence these folks, intimidate them, and really discredit them.
And Sabrina, in a tweet about Ohr Monday morning, President Trump questioned if Ohr would ever be fired from the Jeff Sessions Justice Department. And it's interesting, he put the word justice in quotes. How should we interpret this? Because the president, of course, has been critical, very publicly critical of Jeff Sessions. Is there now a turning point in the level of frustration with Jeff Sessions? Should we read anything into this particular tweet?
Well, it's hard to say if it's a turning point insofar as the president has repeatedly attacked Jeff Sessions. His criticism had reached new heights in recent months, in particular over Jeff Sessions' decision to recuse himself from the Russia investigation, when it was revealed, of course, by the Washington Post last year, in fact, that he had contacts with the Russians during the campaign, which he had not previously disclosed. And ever since, that has caused the president to turn against his own attorney general, and he stopped, of course, just short of actually firing Jeff Sessions, in part because he's been met with a lot of backlash to the very prospect of doing so by Republicans on Capitol Hill. But I think when he continues to attack Sessions, it's hard to say if it means that he is actually considering firing Sessions, or if it's just part of the broader efforts he's made to discredit the FBI and the Justice Department as they oversee this investigation more broadly. It's also worth noting on the question of Bruce Ohr that he was actually demoted by the Justice Department earlier this year, in part because of his ties to Christopher Steele, the author of the dossier, and just the questions around his relationship with the co-founder of Fusion GPS. It's not entirely clear what role he currently holds at the Justice Department, but what they have said is he has no involvement in the Russia investigation whatsoever.
Some important context there. Well, the president says that he gave permission for White House counsel Don McGahn to be interviewed by special counsel Robert Mueller. He's also using McGahn's interviews to question Mueller's investigation. David, walk us through some of the pros and cons the White House saw with McGahn meeting with the special counsel's investigators.
Well, I think what you have here, Elaine, is that early on, the president had one team of legal advisors who developed a strategy that the way to sort of put a quicker end to the Russia investigation was to cooperate fully. The president said he signed off on that, and he allowed his aides to go ahead, including Don McGahn, and do that. But as had been reported by the New York Times over the weekend, there was a sense that McGahn had developed his own strategy and that he was concerned that opening up too much information more so broadly could eventually hurt himself and make him look liable, and that the president even may have been attempting to sort of foist the blame on any improper behavior related to this investigation onto Don McGahn. And so there seems to be this idea that the president, believed that his White House lawyer was his own personal lawyer and that he didn't understand there's two different things going on here. So the president now is reacting very angrily to this idea. He's suggesting, no, I did certainly authorize this. I have nothing to hide, and continuing down this message. But there is apparently a concern that his own personal lawyers, including Rudy Giuliani, and the new team that's in charge of his personal defense in this case, does not know exactly what McGahn has said in these interviews. I think at least 3 of them for many hours to Robert Mueller, and that's a real problem.
Well, and Sabrina, do McGahn's interviews give us any insight at all into whether the president will actually sit down with Mueller?
Not particularly, and I think some of that has to do with the differing strategies of Trump's legal team. Under the previous Ty Cobb, John Dowd-led strategy, there was more of an appetite to try and cooperate with the special counsel. And as David was just pointing out, under Rudy Giuliani, you've seen a far more aggressive approach by the president and his legal team, continuously suggesting that they're negotiating over the terms of an interview. But frankly, after months of those talks with Mueller, there hasn't been any indication that the president is going to sit down with the special counsel. And increasingly, you've seen Rudy Giuliani be pretty forthcoming about why, that he doesn't want to expose the president to a perjury trap. And that's when he trotted out over the weekend this idea that truth isn't truth, when asked, why doesn't the president just tell the truth? And then he would not be charged or pose the risk of perjury. And he hasn't really been able to, of course, explicitly say why he doesn't trust his own client to be able to sit down with the special counsel. And that, I think, is what is at the heart of this issue, that the president's own legal team does not want to put him in front of the special counsel. And I don't think that we have any indication that he will.
Yeah, I mean, David, is that the bottom line here, that really it's the concern about what an undisciplined client might say when sitting down before an investigator, a federal investigator? Because we heard the president's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, at the beginning of the show assert that truth isn't truth. Is that the bottom line here? Is that he's essentially just concerned that the president may inadvertently say something he shouldn't?
Absolutely. I talked to some of my colleagues here at the Washington Post who've gone through pages and pages of depositions of private citizen Donald Trump, who, in his private businesses had a lot of litigation. And they said he actually, if you look and read some of the papers of his testimony and some of this litigation, he's pretty disciplined. But as others point out now as president, this president tends to say a lot of things and often contradict himself and other underlings and other spokespeople, including his own lawyers, at different times of his presidency, whether it's on Twitter, whether it's in public statements or even newspaper reports that have come out about private conversations that he had with friends or advisors. So there's a lot of public record here. And for the president to go in already angry, already worked up privately with somebody like Robert Mueller, who's very skilled at this, he could absolutely open himself up to questions about perjury or other matters.
Well, finally, federal prosecutors are reportedly preparing criminal charges against Michael Cohen. Sabrina, what would formal charges against him mean for the president?
Well, it's very concerning for the president, and he has been particularly focused on Michael Cohen in part because Cohen was not only his personal lawyer for many years, but his self-confessed Mr. Fix-It. Cohen has overseen both the president's personal and professional dealings. He was a keeper of the president's secrets, and he has increasingly shown signs that he is willing to cooperate with prosecutors. Now, whether they are interested in a plea deal with Cohen, we don't yet know. Some of this has to do with charges of bank fraud and tax fraud, and so these are more financial dealings. But there could also be overlap with Mueller's investigation in Russian interference with the election, because when the FBI conducted its raid on Cohen, they did seize tons of documents, some of which could be referred back to the special counsel if relevant. And if Cohen has information that he wants to offer, given his close ties to the president and the Trump organization and anything that might pertain to Moscow, that information would also be referred back to the special counsel, even though this case is being overseen by the district attorney's office, the Southern District of New York. And also, it's also important to note that the president cannot pardon someone for charges that are brought at the state level. He can only do so for federal crimes. And so his power is somewhat limited when it comes to pardoning Cohen.
Interesting. All right. Sabrina Siddiqui and David Nakamura, thank you both. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Elaine.